Welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Blueprint podcast, powered by Lapolis Electric. I'm your host, Steven Marcelino, Vice President of Sales with Lapolis Electric, and I'm here today with a great friend, Michael Dorfman. Michael, how are you today?
Good morning, Steven.
Michael has over 25 years of experience in the securities and concierge service industry. Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit more about that and kind of how you emerged into the industry and the inner working technicalities of that industry?
It was an interesting start. It was almost by just chance, because back in late 2001, I was looking for work and answered a blind New York Times ad, because that was back 25 years ago how people found jobs, and ended up working for a large security guard company, which is now growing much bigger, and interviewed and got the job, and that was my first time in the security guard business.
Wow. So what kind of people were you interacting with when you first came into the industry? Were you dealing with facilities? Were you dealing with construction companies? What was kind of like your entry path into the business? And it's funny, you said you answered a New York Times ad. A lot of people listening to this may or may not know what it's like to fill out a New York Times ad for a job advertisement.
Well, it's sometimes it's blind ads. You send a resume via mail, first-class mail with a cover letter, and to a P.O. box, and you never know where it's going.
That's it.
So,
and you hope you get a call.
And you hope you get a call, correct.
So tell us a little bit about that beginning journey. The types of people you were interacting with, the types of, if it was facilities, if you were staffing for job sites, or, tell us a little bit about that and what your experience coming out of the gate into a new industry looked like.
So given that it was a new industry, I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I knew business development. That was my skill set. And so in the beginning, I spent a bit of time with the operations side of the team. I wanted to find out what they went through, what their customers were expecting.
The best way to learn.
And then I also asked them what they liked about the company at the time and what they didn't like. So that was how I initiated myself, having a business development background and then learning the security guard industry.
Very interesting. And that's typically, when you're going into a new industry or even making a focus shift in the current industry you may be in, like I did. I was originally working on the commercial construction side of Lapolis Electric, and about 4 or 5 years ago, I shifted into a completely new division in a sales role. And the best way for me to learn, like you just said, that product or that service that I was offering was to jump right in with operations, be on the job sites, talk to the guys, look at the blueprints, help the engineers develop the scope of work for the job, and really just suck as much information and knowledge out of the operations teams as possible so I could be of better service to my clients and be more or less like a sales engineer opposed to just, a sales rep.
Correct,
I think there's a big difference, and it's very interesting to hear a fellow salesperson take that perspective, because not a lot do. And, I think it's very important to the overall customer experience and also the internal operation, because instead of, selling a job and just, putting a stack of papers together with the sales scope and, throwing it at somebody's desk and saying, all right, good luck, go run it. If we need to jump in and roll our sleeves up and help out, if operations is overwhelmed or if something's going on, we have the capability of doing so.
That's correct.
So it's very important. So let me dive into a question for us here. So in industry, what does the importance of being a service provider mean to you?
Well, it's about listening to what a prospective client needs or wants. It's not about what you can provide. You have to understand it. It's where's their pain points? Where are they having difficulties? And it's all about a lot of listening skills and asking the right questions.
When you are in the field, so to speak, or on a qualification call, what are the types of questions you're asking, a prospective client to listen to them? Because I think good reps, like yourself that have been in the industry for quite some time, you have qualification questions that you ask, and you really, dissecting those answers so you could best provide service to that client.
Well, it's an open-ended question. You want to hear the customer talk about what they're experiencing, what their goals are, what they want to accomplish. And when it's a security situation, obviously, when I joined in just after 9/11 back in 2001, it was a very different world. And it has certainly expanded and grown in terms of security protocols in all types of industries. So every building, every client, every vertical market that we service is different. Even clients in the same vertical market are going to be different. So you want to hear as to what they expect and what their goals are, whether it be a commercial office building, whether it be a distribution center. So there's a lot of different types of individuals that we talk to: directors of security, facility managers, property managers from a commercial real estate world. We do a lot of education, so it's executive directors. And some people who may not have the experience that we have, but they have a vision as to what that security team looks like. Residential is going to be a community manager, so that's the concierge side of the business. And those visions are different in all different types of residential buildings or gated communities.
I know you mentioned there's, it's all based on the vertical market or the scenario. What are some of the more like unordinary scenarios you've had to staff security for? Are you staffing on job sites as well, or what is are there any niche markets that you're dealing with outside of like the ordinary commercial industry, so to speak, that you deal with on a day-to-day basis?
So I think the education world is all very unique. It could be a private school, public school, or a charter school. Everybody, and geographically, even for all the other vertical markets, the geographics are going to be different. It's challenging to understand that. But again, you want to listen to what that client's vision is in terms of what that security program looks like.
Yeah.
We typically go after the private schools. They have a higher end client because obviously private schools, there's tuition associated with that versus public schools. And they have a budget to have a robust security program. Very
interesting. And when you're dealing with, a lot of the private schools, is it, fairly simple, or is there hurdles when you get involved that, overcoming objections, so to speak? How does that kind of come into play when you're dealing with more of like the private schools? Because I can imagine, there's children in the schools. There's we live in a very different world, this day and age when it comes to schools, with a lot of, I would say, quote unquote, security risks, that we hear a lot about on the news. So what are like some of the common objections that you may hear that you have to overcome when dealing with, private schools specifically?
All clients, I would say, is the quality of a security guard. But I also want to hear, so how do I approach that? I want to hear what their expectation, or a job description, if you will. A job description creates a wage. A wage then drives a bill rate. So we're a outsourced security team.
Gotcha.
And that's how we understand what that is, and that's how we create our proposals. So the challenges is quality of individual. So unfortunately, the security guard world is sometimes a lower paying type of position. So turnover is in terms of the employee, is a big problem, but we create unique programs. So it's custom. If someone calls me and says, "Oh, what's your rate?" That's typically not a client of mine, because we don't have a document that says, "Here's my price list." So I always push for and schedule a face-to-face meeting. Not so easy in today's world sometimes, but it's important. And then a lot of open-ended questions, like I said earlier, create that job description, which they validate. And sometimes we do it in writing, and then the proposal comes out. So at that point, if the prospective customer is investing in their security program, then there's not a lot of challenges to overcome. But if their budgets are tight, which in many cases there are, because we're a non-revenue producing department, if you will.
Yep.
People want sometimes the best security program, but the lower the cost, the better.
Yeah.
And again, those are typically like Lapolis Electric. I'm sure those are not necessarily your clients either. So
Yeah, I think you said a couple really interesting things that I resonate with personally, kind of backtracking a little bit. I think asking questions, whether you're in sales, operations, whether you're CEO or you're a first year, rep, I think asking questions to clients is everything. Because if you're going to walk into a room and just talk about yourself and make the conversation all about me, 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 that person probably is not going to want to speak to you, in my opinion and in my experience. Just based off the sole fact that when you're in front of somebody in their head, this meeting is about me from the client's perspective, and I want to be asked questions. I want to answer questions. I want to talk about myself.
Right.
And that's kind of like a psychological thing, and the more questions you ask, not just from the making them feel good standpoint of letting them speak, you can actually offer them a better product. And in your situation, just like mine, you're offering custom security programs. I develop custom electrical preventative maintenance programs for, mitigating electrical fires, hazards, and building interruptions. And if I don't ask qualifying questions to prospects like, have you experienced any power outages in your building? Do your lights flicker throughout the day? Have you experienced any spikes or sags in power? Or can you shut your building down to perform maintenance on your switchgear? Or, do you have machines in the building? Do you see there is any inefficiency in the way your motors are running? And just asking different questions, so to speak, to qualify what this person needs, what this prospect needs. I cannot offer them a accurate program without asking questions. If I just sit there and talk about myself the whole time, I'm going to leave and be like, oh, well, I have no information on that person.
Right. Exactly.
I learned more about myself, but now I can't help this prospect. So I think, there's a saying, take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth. And that really just means, shut up and listen.
Right.
And be very good at taking notes. And that's something that's very important to me, and I try and say that on a daily basis. You and I were talking before the show. I would say we both have the gift of gab, and it's not usual in a prospect or client situation for us to sit there and just talk. We want to listen, we want to qualify, and we want to make sure that person's time is respected while we're in the room with them.
Well, but then you're also able to learn and then be able to, it's maybe you're not necessarily offering every single service you have.
No.
You're going to cherry pick what you can help them with, and then it becomes a relationship.
Yep.
Then there's a trust factor. There's a reputation. You're going to fulfill their needs. You're going to listen to what they want, and you're going to do it at a budget competitive price that they can afford, we hope.
Correct. And that's really important too. If you're actually listening to someone, you shouldn't have to offer them every service you have. Right. I really think a real sales rep or a good sales rep knows all the services a company has to offer in the back of their head. You listen to the prospect and you say, I think they're going to qualify best for these maybe, 1, 2, or 3 services. And then over time, you develop that relationship with them. They become a client for life. And next thing you know, you're offering them the A service, the B service, the C, the E, the D, and the other services we have, because you make them aware of it through marketing material or whatever it may be. But when you're actually speaking, you don't just jam all the services down their throat and say, you waterboard them with your with your services. Agreed. You don't want to do that to people. And the other interesting thing you mentioned is you're developing custom programs. I think that's really important because, when you're dealing with somebody that you could just get, for your situation, if you could just get a security guard from somebody for $15 an hour and you just stick them in a building, well, there's not going to be much behind that. But I can only imagine, like me, if for us, the big area we see it is like an infrared testing. Like, we don't offer one-off infrared testing. If you want our infrared testing service, we develop a full energized electrical preventative maintenance program for you that encompasses all the other functions of preventative maintenance that a facility should be performing, for compliance purposes, so we know and you're compliant with all the different codes out there. Your facility is now considered free of electrical hazard. And we also now know by completing our program, your equipment is going to run efficiently. So we're offering programs more or less for safety and peace of mind.
Right.
And, that's really where it comes down to. And that's what separates us, from our competitors. And I've worked now over the past few years with clients that were utilizing the one-off, we call them shoot and scoot, infrared testing companies. And from that, yeah, they may have been saving, some money, but then when you actually look at it on paper and you look at the reports and what you're receiving, they're saving more money by investing in our program than if they're using a one-off service, because they didn't realize how many, inefficiencies they really had, because those one-off companies, they're not there to develop a relationship with you. They want to come in that one time a year, do their service, get paid, and keep going. They're not looking to come in if you need me every week. I'll come in every week. I tell people, I'm not a lawyer. You don't get invoiced by me by the hour to speak to me. I'm here for my clients anytime they need me. And that's kind of, the mindset we have in developing programs opposed to one-off services.
Right. Well, the relationship is very important because we're ongoing. We're not just a one-time job type situation. So we have to, in the security guard world or concierge services side, is meet or exceed expectations on a daily basis.
Correct.
Literally, sometimes you live by the phrase, you're only as good as what you did this morning or yesterday. And you have to then meet and exceed. In my world, it's not difficult. There are 3 key areas to really focus in on. It's about recruiting. It's about management and supervision and training. And you say to yourself, that's really easy, but you'd be surprised. It's also about investing. Ownership. I work for a private company. They invest in those 3 key areas, and that's how we keep our clients. So we have a lot of management out in the field that are managing those teams. They're training them, and they're inspecting them. So that is important to make sure that we're meeting and exceeding the deliverables on a daily basis, whether it be to a facility manager, property manager, a company owner, or what have you, or an executive director at a private school.
Very interesting. So let me dovetail, actually, because this is kind of on the same topic. The next question I was thinking, what are some tips that you could give our listeners on how to properly deal with a facility manager? Because I think facility managers, every person is different. Everyone has a different personality. Everyone has different expectations on how they want their building ran. So what are some tips and tricks, that you have on how to deal with a facility manager so they have a pleasant experience with you? Not only, two-part question, not only on the sales side, but also on the operations end.
That's right. Because
as you and I know, a lot of the time when you do turn an account over to operations to perform the project, you set a specific expectation for your company in those meetings when you're developing the programs and signing the contracts. So what's their expectation there on a customer service end? And then what's the expectation of a facility manager on an operations end so they're happy from point A to point B?
So I think it's about research and knowledge. So if you're going, like any prospect, regardless of a facilities manager, you need to be knowledgeable on the company and understand their background, know what they like and don't like. And sometimes you can find that out by interacting with them in associations. There's, facility-oriented associations. There's property, commercial real estate associations. And it's about networking. And then you establish your reputation. And those FMs or property managers, whoever you're dealing with, are going to do their own research. And then they're going to know about your company and they're going to know about you because you're out there and you're networking. And you then have your reputation by providing great services to other clients because then there's references. So I think that's all very important. And when I was growing up through the industry, if you will, back 25 years ago, is you want to connect yourself with maybe a mentor. Today, a little bit harder to do that just simply because there's not, in many cases, a traditional office. So I encourage the younger generation, if you will, to get out to those networking events, to those industry associations.
Very important.
And get a mentor. talk to them.
That's how you and I met.
Yeah.
You and I met through networking. You
That's
know,
right.
and this right here is a live example of how important networking is. You know, the people you meet. You know, the different kind of scenarios you're put in. You know, social scenarios that you're put in to expand on. Everybody you know personally, and it's really important. I think, in today's world, it's changing dramatically because of technology. Everybody thinks, listen, I'm a big social media proponent, but I think people have a misconception that you could go on social media, like a million photos, comment, DM people, share content. These are all great things, but at the same token, that should not replace in-person networking.
Agreed.
I think in-person networking is an extremely powerful tool that if you utilize it, it's going to put you kind of above all, because social media for some people, especially, the generations before me, they're a little ambivalent about it. So if I want to connect with, someone like yourself or Carmine Lapolis or, all of the friends that we have through networking, I would have a better chance of meeting that person in person opposed to sending them a message on Instagram or LinkedIn potentially and, trying to just talk to them through a digital screen. And that's not because you don't believe in social media, but I think there's a barrier that's put up when you reach out digitally. Sometimes people are almost like they feel kind of like awkward to respond at first to a digital message before they know who that person is.
I think the message is also multi-leveled. So it is all of the the digital side as well as the networking. And then you meet other people because then you get referrals because you establish yourself as a worthy organization that can fulfill those clients' expectations. You have a reputation, and then you get referrals from those networking organizations. And then they also offer training, meaning for facilities oriented, you can take classes and then you learn more. And then there are various events and different types of events to go to, but volunteering in those organizations are also very important, in my opinion. And that's where I've found to get ahead and establish yourself in that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think, volunteering is great in a lot of the organizations, and just overall attendance, and being there, it's extremely important. And I know you're involved with associations. What associations are you involved with exactly that you are going to network? Maybe somebody listening to this is looking for a new industry association to join, and this could be a good opportunity for them to kind of open up and look into anything you may be involved with.
Organizations like IFMA, IFMA, International Facility Managers Association. I'm on committees and on the board for that. I participate in BOMA, which is Building Owners and Managers Association. And then there's an offshoot of IFMA called AMFP, Association of Medical Facility Professionals. But then don't forget the private or local networking groups.
Correct.
And you need to, visit them, see if they fit for you, and then the others in the group as well fit for you. And you can audit them and check them out. You get invited and you see if that networking group works for you. And if it does, you continue with it. But it's also about, I believe in paying it forward. So if you're going to network, I don't just release, my client base and referrals to just anybody. I typically have a one-on-one with them, and I got to get to know that person. I need to trust them before I, introduce them to one of my prized possessions, my clients. Yep. Because if something is to go really well, that goes really well for me, but it can be just the flip side of that as well. And you never want that to happen. So you got to know that person, trust them, before you refer them to your client base.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more, because at the end of the day, a referral to somebody is an extension of yourself. So if something goes wrong, although you may not work with that company, you may not be that rep that you're, that's directly dealing with the client, but if something does go wrong and you referred that company to your client, you're going to get blamed for that.
Well, yeah,
To a degree.
blame's a tough word, but yet it's not going to help you in terms of your reputation with that
No,
that client that you just introduced.
It's not.
So again, it's extremely important to make sure if you're referring a lead to someone, you know them, you trust them, and they're going to do not only 100%, you hope they're going to do 150% because they know they got that referral from you.
100%, yeah. And that's true, and so let me ask, during, I'm backtracking a little, but obviously during COVID, networking was very tough. How has that whole kind of COVID-19, virtual era impacted networking to current date, or has it kind of restored itself back to normal now? I think some people, I don't want to say a lot because I've been to a few of the IFMAs, I've been to a few other association events over the course of the past, keeping in this last year, and it looks like everything's more or less come back to life. But I think you're much more involved in the in-person networking world than I am. What did that impact look like? I'm actually curious to know.
So there was good things and bad things, just like anything else. And I'm a glass half full kind of a guy. There's always a silver lining. There's always a positive thing to take out of something negative like COVID. So the positive that came out of that, it was everything went to Zoom or Teams, and you got to meet a lot more people from other regions or in other states. So that was worthwhile, especially if you worked with a national company. If you're a provider, that was great. Now it is getting the more events are all in person, but if there's now committee meetings, it's very common to have in person. If you're on an association and you have that committee, you have some people on Zoom or Teams and some people live. And it also allows your schedule to be such a way you don't have to be, especially if you're going to go into Manhattan, an hour and some change to get to an hour meeting, and that's your only one. So in that situation, COVID obviously brought up, and Zoom is a very popular option. And a lot of companies where there's meetings, they have the ability in their conference rooms to have those people join in from other areas. So there, again, good news, bad news kind of thing. So the events are all back to normal for the most part. It's been really good. The numbers are all up. I deal with a networking committee. And we just launched for IFMA the Westchester Hudson Valley chapter again, if you will.
Very exciting.
But now we have the backing and the resources of the New York City chapter to help us with that. Not an easy feat, but it's we had our first meeting, so it's now in the numbers are going up, which is great.
That's excellent. And let me ask, when you're in the networking events, for those first-time networkers, so to speak, you might feel a little uncomfortable. There's definitely a lot of relationships in the room, and it could be a little intimidating, walking into that room for the first time to the point where, you don't want to find yourself being that man or woman that's kind of just, standing in the corner waiting for someone to come to you. Because what I've noticed, networking, it's not speed dating. You're not going there to whatever you think the outcome may be that you create in your head. But, there is definitely a certain approach to individuals in the networking events. So what would you say, what's your number one piece of advice you could give to a new networker that's walking into a networking event such as IFMA? There's a lot of people there, a lot of professionals, and it could be slightly intimidating to kind of go in there and break down those walls, both mentally in their own mind and also with another person, to just break the ice and start talking.
So two things for that I'd say is if you're in business development, but you may not be, if you're going to these networking events, you could be a facility manager or property manager. I hope all business development folks feel comfortable going up to talk to people. But if you don't, invite someone who's in the industry to go with you. Wingman us in such a way.
Kind of is like speed dating.
Right? And then you go up and you talk to people. And if you're going by yourself, just go up to a group of people and introduce yourself and because if you don't, because if it's other groups and everybody's talking, you could be that person kind of just standing there. But I'd say just go up and say hello to somebody. And if it's then when you sit down, if it's a dinner, go to sit at a place that you don't know anybody at. And then everybody introduces themselves. Then you want to connect with that social media side of it, LinkedIn, because that's going to be important as a an add-on, if you will, to the in-person, because the social media, your connections in
It's a
LinkedIn.
social tool.
It's a tool, correct.
Yeah, that's very great advice. And one more thing I wanted to ask before we wrap up, because this is something, that I always ask myself, right? I'm 27 years old, but there's some things I do that are 27 years old, and there's also some things I do in business that are, 50, 60 years old, and it shows, the I guess, wisdom of my mentors, so to speak. One of them is business cards. I cannot stand when I go to hand someone my business card and they're like, here, tap the back of my phone. Mm-hmm. Do you think that there is like a psychological, reaction to handing someone a business card opposed to tapping the back of someone's phone and having all their information?
So I'm probably on the opposite end of that, because I've been doing this for a long time. I like the business cards.
I
It's
agree.
something you take home, you can, see it, and you have all the information. If you tap, I have 700 contacts on my phone, 800 contacts.
Yeah.
It kind of goes into the abyss, because if you don't remember their name, then you're never going to find them. So that's kind of the pros and the cons. Yes, business cards are not necessarily needed, but it's always a nice thing. I do some old school stuff. I travel with a pad, so if they're going to tap my phone, I'll typically write their name down so I can then find that information in my phone later on, and then I'll probably hit them up on LinkedIn as well.
For any of the younger listeners listening in right now, they may or may not know what this is, but I actually have a Rolodex in my desk in my office with all the business cards. I have a Rolodex for clients and vendors or people I may be actively networking with, and then I have a Rolodex for prospects.
No Rolodex for me.
No Rolodex.
That I'll use my phone for. Because if I need to find your phone number, it's quite simple. Siri's going to find it, or I can easily find your name. But I think that's important. If that works for you, also got to figure out, if you're on the younger side, what works for you.
Yeah.
Reminders, applications are very important. Your CRM is going to be very important.
CRM is. That's another podcast right there on CRM.
Exactly.
I could talk about that for hours.
So you got to use all of your tools, like you said, for the common goal, and is to get new business. If you're in the business development side, it's going to be
100%.
about, yes, old school mailers, potentially emails. You talked about the social media. You might attempt, or you want to become a subject matter expert in your industry.
100%.
And then you'll write content, if you will, on social media. So all of those tools put together, including your Rolodex, will create relationships with your clients and long-term business.
Yeah, I agree. And you said it perfectly right there. It's the culmination of everything. I don't think anybody in any industry can do just one thing on a marketing scale and be successful. I think you need to do a little bit of everything. I think that's where we are right now in business, doing a little bit of everything. In-person networking, digital networking, for the social side of it, going to golf outings, whatever it may be. And then on the, organizational side, keeping a physical calendar, writing in the notepad, having notes in the iPhone, maintaining, calendar invites and meetings and fiscal expectations and things of that nature in the CRM. It's important to use a little bit of everything. Correct. And that's kind of what makes the circle whole, in my opinion, when it comes to business this day and age. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself to just doing one thing. Right. In any aspect of business.
If I was to give, you brought up earlier about a tip. If I was to say a tip, I love LinkedIn, because you're going to find people when they move to different jobs.
Yep.
And that's going to be helpful information, especially if they're moving from a company that was a prospect or is going to be a prospect. Now you have some contacts, and those are going to be, and you can then reach out to those folks via LinkedIn. That's going to be a helpful area in any type of business development relationship. You can start out that way, but not use it as a sole communicative tool.
Correct. Listen, I think that's a great tip and tidbit to end on here, Michael. I just want to thank you
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it.
for coming out today and speaking with us and providing us with your expertise both on the security and concierge staffing industry, a little bit on how to deal with FMs, and I think that was a very great, knowledgeable conversation about networking. And I just want to thank you for coming in and speaking with the listeners today.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome, Michael. I want to thank the listeners again for tuning into another episode of the Beyond the Blueprint podcast, powered by Lapolis Electric. I'm your host, Stephen Marcelino, Vice President of Sales with Lapolis Electric. Have a great day.